We are now several days into protests at the actual homes of Supreme Court justices in anticipation of the ruling to overturn Roe and Casey and return the issue of abortion back to the states. Demonstrators drew coat hangers and chalk on the street outside the home of Chief Justice John Roberts on Saturday, which makes no sense considering all indications are he's on their side on this decision. So maybe those are martini glasses to celebrate and thank Roberts for his compliance on the issue. Who knows? Not high effort. The scene at Kavanaugh's was perhaps slightly more tense, but still a little more than just NPC broadcast programming.
We will not go back. I see you, buddy. We will not go back.
Great. Then live in a state that doesn't go back in your judgment. Kavanaugh's pending opinion is that you get to decide for yourself in your state. So if you don't want to go back, don't. There's nothing coming from Brett Kavanaugh that's forcing you to. And that's the thing about this effort. It's a terrible tactic made more terrible by terrible arguments. Not that a good argument yelled at somebody's doorstep is sensible, but if you're so motivated to go to somebody's home to express your outrage, you'd think you might actually think through that outrage and have a good point to make. But after a few days to think about it, the mob got to Alito's home on Monday night, and it's clear they did not.
Fuck you, Alito! Fuck you, Alito! Fuck you!
Though, in fairness, that is actually among the better pro-Roe arguments I've ever heard. Far better than the emanations and penumbras nonsense from the court itself. Well, I'm glad that we agree on dismantling federal power. I just hope you understand that once the court is aborted, the issue still gets returned to the states. But what would I know? I'm not biologically qualified to opine, of course.
No uterus! No uterus! It's no say. No say! No say!
No uterus, no say. And yet, here they are. Dozens of men, with presumably no uteri among them, having their say to defend an opinion said by all men 50 years ago. But even that isn't the most nonsensical, self-defeating reasoning of the night.
It's my body, it's my choice. As I said before, my mother didn't have a choice, so I'm here. But I had 57 years of misery. If she had a choice, she would have made different decisions, and I might not have been here, and nobody would have been the wiser.
My mother didn't have a choice, and so I'm here. Now, you could stop the argument there and be thankful for your life, but instead she continues to express regret that she ever had any opportunity to live it at all. It's a pretty bizarre thing to picket for your own death, considering there are quicker ways to get it if you want, but I don't even believe that this lady is real. I think she's a Babylon Bee plant, and if she isn't, they should hire her to write headlines immediately. Now, of course, these protest scenes at private homes are morally wrong. I will defend the speech rights of everybody, including the screeching, irrational harpies who wish they weren't alive and their neutered male tag-alongs who enable their insanity. But there are certain realities that are unavoidable. When you target homes and families and neighbors and all the property involved, you are creating a situation that will escalate in hostility very quickly. That's why we have and why the Constitution has long allowed time, place, and manner restrictions. You certainly have a right to say Alito, but it doesn't necessarily extend to the bullhorn in the cul-de-sac at 3 a.m. And there's another escalation still when the intent is to influence a judge in an active court case. That's why such a thing against a federal judge is a violation of federal law. If we allow pitchforks and torches to influence justice, we won't have justice at all. The point is, while the speech rights of everybody are crucially important, the peace rights of the residential neighborhood are also crucially important. And I don't mean to understate how seriously this effort tears at our social fabric, say nothing of the law of the matter. Just on moral principle, this is something a healthy society opposes and does not engage in. All that said, can we just acknowledge how weak and pathetic this effort actually was? A thing can be both wrong on principle and completely lame in practice, which all of this was. It was a laughably embarrassing turnout and effort. For all the anger of Elizabeth Warren on the court steps.
I am angry.
For all the poetics of Hillary Clinton.
This opinion is dark. It is incredibly dangerous.
For all the promises of retribution that progressives have been screaming about for a week, their best effort was 50 people marching for about 20 minutes, according to two sources on the scene. Of course, you might argue that the Alito protest was particularly weak given the news that he's not even home, so maybe that's why the low turnout, but the numbers at the other protests have been similar. We're not seeing overwhelming mobs. We're seeing a few dozen losers so pathetic they still wear masks outside. What I'm asking is this actually all they have? Have they run out of Screech juice? And I mean that literally, as in the fuel for their outrage. I know that sounds kind of gross in the context of the career path of Dustin Diamond, God rest his soul. Call it Screech juice, call it refuel, call it whatever you want. The point is, just like actual gas, it appears that energy is in much shorter supply than Democrats are willing to take responsibility for. And they're going to have to figure something out, because it's very hard to imagine that these weak protests, while annoying and ill-advised and legally dubious, are going to have any meaningful effect. A Washington Post report at the end of last week cites 3 anonymous conservative sources close to the court, saying that at about the time of the leak itself, the 5-member majority to overturn Roe was still intact. Nobody has wavered since the February draft, as was previously speculated. If these justices are firm in their reasoning and opinions, it is highly likely the opinion is already set. The decision is already made. The words are already written and proofread. If you want to intimidate your way out of that, you'll probably have better luck trying to intimidate the hard drive on which all of that is stored, which means this ain't it. And while I am tempted to take comfort in believing that they actually are out of juice, that they have neither the energy nor the means to stop what is already a done deal, I also know never to underestimate the capacity of these people for shenanigans. But I just don't see what shenanigans they obviously have available. Chuck Schumer is going to take a legislative flail at it, setting up a vote on Wednesday on a bill to codify Roe nationally, knowing that he doesn't have the votes for the bill or to end the filibuster to try to get them, but he's still going to do it to put all senators on record on the issue, as though any non-Democrat fears going on record against Chuck Schumer ahead of what looks like a historic electoral beatdown headed his way in 6 months. Oh no, not that, anything but that. How will I explain to voters that I opposed Chuck Schumer's plan to cram his insane abortion ideas down your throat from DC? That's a political asset for anyone's campaign, not a liability, and that's if it's even a voter priority at all. It's hard to imagine independent voters being enraged at the thought of their state deciding this issue for itself. Harder still to imagine independent voters prioritizing this issue over the current economic disasters in their lives. The progressive propaganda machine can't erase that reality, but that doesn't mean they don't try. The Washington Post published this hilarious headline on Monday: "The GOP is making a midterm bet that voters will care more about inflation than abortion." That's not a bet. That is a reality. They will. The GOP bets that voters will see the sky as blue. The GOP bets that voters will be subject to gravity. The GOP bets that voters might actually look at their wallets before deciding. These are functionally the same statement according to the Democratic Party's own conventional wisdom of yesteryear. But just in case you think that wisdom is old-fashioned or outdated, it isn't. Current polling shows it too. CNN is the only pollster with post-leak generic congressional ballot results, but their data show respondents moving more toward Republican candidates, not away. Of course, it's hard to say the leak was the cause of that shift, but in the days immediately before the leak, a generic Republican candidate was at +1 in this poll. In the days immediately after, that same generic Republican candidate bumped to +7. So they don't have the power in the court itself. They don't have the power in the mob on the street. They don't have the power in Congress, and they don't have the power in the will of the voter either. I just don't see the political angle here. They have to either flip a justice's vote or gain votes in Congress, and they can't. And there's really no underhanded way to achieve those things, unless they want to go with the ultimate underhand. And I wouldn't count it out. For as comfortable as I am that these people have no political path to their ends, that comfort rests on the premise that they take their path according to political constraints. They don't. And there's now advocacy emerging to that effect. And it's not mine, Susan. I disavow This is Beetlejuice's over in Chicago. Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Twitter is calling for the alphabet mafia to take up arms in defiance of the Supreme Court. She is apparently the Thomas Jefferson of the looming gay war, the founding gender-neutral parent of the next American Revolution. No Twitter ban for that one, no incitement charges pending either, of course. And while it is just a preposterous showing from a pathetically weak person, just like the Alito protest itself, I have to wonder, what is the true plan here? Is it closer to the laughable underperformance of these home protests, or is it closer to the pledge for violent escalation from the mayor of the country's third largest city? These are dramatic threats with equally dramatic underdelivery. Whatever happens, I am glad that Lightfoot finally sees the value in keeping and bearing arms for the preservation of rights and the deterrence of government tyranny. Maybe we can find some common ground in founding American principles after all, and avoid a flamboyantly bloody rediscovery of them. But if not, I have only one condition. The Great Gay War must be fought with confiscated Chicago ghost guns. It's only fair to acknowledge that even the supposedly evil guns have some legitimate practical purpose. And besides, the world knows no greater arms supply. We don't have to get fancy, even if the Civil War is. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Gab. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to coming out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it.